It is the ultimate moment of life for all living creatures. It is the final mystery, the universal experience that we really know very little about. Death. The spiritual journey at the end of life is one marked by profound struggle, profound wrestling and contemplation, and yet also, amazingly, profound wonder. When death goes smoothly, when pain is well controlled, it can be one of the most difficult and yet one of the most profound experiences of life. I'm Reverend David Maginley. I've been a chaplain in palliative cancer and intensive care for 20 years. I have sat at the bedside of hundreds as they've died. And I'd like to explore with you the spiritual journey at the end of life. To do so, we have to understand what is spirituality. Now, that is a sense of connection to something fundamentally mysterious and foundational to reality itself. Lutheran theologian Paul Tillich described it as the ground of being, your connection to that primal foundational consciousness from which we believe the universe emanates. That's pretty amazing. Spirituality can be theistic, which is you believe in a God and in spiritual entities in a spiritual realm. Or it can be naturalistic, in which the spirituality is based in meaning, principles, and values that are at the core of your identity. I invite you to consider that spirituality is not determined so much by the content of one's belief system as it is by the quality of one's love. That's because all healthy spiritual traditions say that it boils down to relationships, what we might sum up in the golden rule. Treat others as you would want to be treated. How do you love? How do you love and care for yourself, your body, each other? How is your connection to the world and ultimately to that mystery beyond? So when we're talking about spirituality at the end of life, the most meaningful part of that homework is going to be in what I like to call the unfinished love stories. How have I been loved? How have I loved well? Do I feel connected to something that I'm not even able to articulate, but I feel is a safe place of transformation and belonging and meaning? In the end, people don't reflect so much about how much they made or how much they accumulated. They tend to think about their relationships and that love story. Perhaps relationships are the only clothing we wear to heaven. If that's the case, let love be your spiritual practice. The priority of relationships for those dying is borne out in the four concerns that they usually have on their minds. The first one is the concern for their loved ones, feeling the burden of care and sorrow upon their hearts. They want to know that they will be well after you have departed this world. And their concern speaks of a really good heart, a noble quality of their soul. Right? When they care for others as their first concern, that indicates they have become a beautiful human being. The second concern is suffering, especially imagined suffering, as death approaches. This is viscerally, of course, experienced as pain, so that level of suffering must be taken care of. We cannot take care of the soul until we first take care of the body, so pain medication has to be well balanced. As a huge dimension of pain is existential suffering and grief. Know that just as pain medication is an effective analgesic for the body's pain, compassion is an effective medication for the soul's pain. While we prepare to say goodbye to that one person, they prepared to say goodbye to reality, to everything they've ever known. So the scale of their grief is going to be different than everyone else's. It follows a parallel but separate course. We go through anticipatory grief as we prepare to say goodbye to that beautiful individual. They go through preparatory grief. This is so complex they can't do it all at once or in an overt logical way. It is done sporadically and through contemplation. usually in the dark of night, and tender moments of reflection and awareness. Since grief is the price we pay for love, the struggle then is not in dying, it's in leaving. That's where the heaviest parts rest upon the heart. Hold that grief tenderly. Help the dying person process it and express it. The third concern is unfinished business, for the future that will not be, for the past that feels so unfinished. We make peace with that through sharing our story, through just sitting with someone who will receive it without interruption and help draw it out so that we can reflect back upon what is significant for us, what mattered, and what is left undone. Through having someone who will help us name the incomplete acts and the unspoken words, the unfinished business then comes into repair and forgiveness, integration, and release. The fourth concern is actual death, and this rises to the top as it approaches. Yet what is approaching is something so great we cannot comprehend it, except in the simplest terms, that we either shut off or we continue in some form. It's the ultimate event, and it's one that fundamentally we surrender ourselves to. That is a critical aspect of the spiritual journey at the end of life, and it is one that we resist. We'll get into that in detail in a moment. But giving ourselves to this process, I want to emphasize, is not giving up, but it's opening up to the mystery and the wisdom wired within us to undergo this transformation. The spiritual journey at the end of life is then about opening up to a mystery that will receive us as we say goodbye and thank you, as we forgive the unfinished parts of life, and move on with gratitude for the body and an acknowledgement for its purpose in carrying us on this, what amazingly, in hindsight, feels like such a brief journey. The decades just flash by at the end of life, and we wonder, how did I arrive so suddenly at this bed, in this company, in this state, on the edge of mortality? This process is the most difficult thing anyone can ever go through. In no small part because our ego identity, everything we have thought we were in this world, resists its deconstruction through suffering and through death. Now, this is at the core of the spiritual journey at the end of life. It was most effectively explored by a fantastic writer and expert in hospice care, Kathleen Dowling Singh. Now, she wrote a book called The Grace in Dying, in which she identifies how what we are in the world, the ego identity, is deconstructed through suffering and through death. Let me show you through this chart. In it, we see that the body and matter is the densest form of spirit. They are not two different worlds. And when we come into this world, we have no labels or differentiation between ourselves and the environment around us. So ego formation begins, there's a contraction of consciousness, when we realize we are in an environment. The second contraction comes when we realize there's living and non-living, animate and inanimate objects in the environment, and we can interact and relate to them in different ways. A third contraction occurs, forming ego identity, in which we realize we are in a body, we are a mind in a body, and we can look out upon our own form. The fourth contraction that is very significant in forming ego identity is messages and material which are at odds with our ego identity, which we cannot integrate. That material moves into what is now called the subconscious. And we spend a lifetime working with that, wrestling with it, and trying to integrate it once again. So notice how ego identity at the beginning and perhaps the first third of life is shaped and molded by our relationships. I have an attachment as a young infant to a favorite toy, but then I lose it and I grieve profoundly. I've lost a fundamental part of myself. Or a sibling is born and my role, identity in the family is changed. We move through grades, we move through friendships, we move from homes, and we move into careers, all of these shaping and supporting or challenging who and what we think we are in the world. Now, in the second half of life, or through crisis and suffering, this process is reversed. Events happen in our life which trigger the material in our subconscious to rise to the surface for integration. So we lose a relationship, we lose a job, we lose a home. All of these threaten and challenge the integrity of who we are. And then as we become ill, we lose our functioning, our independence, our dignity, our self-determination. These also challenge the core aspects of who and what we think we are in the world. Now, this is really accelerated as we receive a terminal diagnosis or approach the end of life through natural causes. Now, this material that rises up through the subconscious presents the most challenging stage for the ego identity. Defense mechanisms automatically kick in, including efforts to control, frustration or anger projected at staff or family, resistance to increasing dependency, despondency, shutting down, irritation. That can result in a period of despair as one is wrestling with the end of life, withdrawal, frustration, giving up hope, or just not knowing how to navigate the endless hours of waiting. This is a critical stage in the spiritual journey for the dying person to have someone who's simply compassionately present, providing a mirror in which they can bounce off their ideas, their sorrow, and unpack for the final journey of their life. That is often called the dark night of the soul, a wilderness stage of grieving who and what we were in the world. It is best met with compassion, with understanding, and any act that upholds the dignity of the person, honors what is being lost, and opens to what may be discovered. Let's remember that this person is going through profound preparatory grief. They are negotiating with mortality. Everything they thought they were in the world is being eroded by suffering until they are reduced to the size of the bed and the body. Holding space for them to grieve this, to go to a state of contemplation, to simply be silent with you, is profoundly therapeutic and more powerful than you may imagine. Be deeply present, be deeply caring, and you will be a deep incarnation of the love and hope that they are looking for. It takes great patience and wisdom to stay with this existential distress for prolonged periods of time. So if you're a care worker or a family member, have others spell you off. Go out for a walk, get some fresh air, get a good night's sleep, and break up the day with perhaps 2-hour intervals in which you'd simply spend time in silence, gentle conversation about ordinary things, celebration and tears, looking at what was joyous and beautiful in life, and staying with what is broken and what is unfinished. In fact, as difficult as that may sound, it also creates the most beautiful moments of connection, belonging, and awareness of just the gift of each other. It's lovely work. In the process of ego deconstruction, after this period of despair, comes a period of peace, of acceptance, and you can sense it in the person. There are very few words, but there is a resting. And then as they die, often, and this is pretty amazing, there is a sense of connection, expansion, and even joy as they move into a transpersonal state of consciousness beyond anything we can comprehend, and then leave this world. The process of ego deconstruction and spiritual emergence is facilitated by rituals. Now, a ritual is a formal action using an object with an intention and an action with others, and usually tied to a tradition of centuries generations who will perform this ritual. And the purpose of it is to shift your consciousness to love, to a deeper sense of connection, an opening to that mystery. Now, we can call this God or spirit, but in the end, you can't really put it into words. A ritual is somatic. It's not about the words, it's about creating an experience, multisensory, multidimensional. Now, it is not done only for you. A ritual is done for the community because spirituality is about relationships, which includes your family, your culture, and the world. On a practical level, at the end of life, of course, what we're talking about is a way to provide comfort and closure and to honor the gift of who this person is. It's a way to say goodbye to everything you think you are and open up to the mystery of what you will become. So, a ritual like Holy Communion connects us to the mystery that we are one in the Christ, the creative consciousness from which reality emanates. The ritual of anointing affirms that the body is a vessel, that we are loved and special in God's eyes. In the Buddhist tradition, the ritual of Tonglen awakens us to a compassionate purpose as we breathe in others' suffering and we breathe back our compassion. So that's what Tonglen means, receiving and giving. It is a way to act in solidarity with those who suffer, and through that, you change your relationship to your own suffering. It's quite transformative and has a parallel in the Christian tradition to redemptive suffering. In Islam, the talqin is a prayer to assist the dying in being spiritually ready for their transformation. The shahada is said preferably by the dying as their last words, affirming the sovereignty that Allah is one. These are just a few formal rituals for the dying, but their rituals can also be informal, and they're powerful for anyone leaving this world. Of course, if you don't have a ritual or a religious tradition, that doesn't mean rituals can't be part of your saying farewell and opening up to wonder. With individual rituals, you can get really creative, incorporating personal elements that represent the person's life, their unfinished homework, and releasing broken parts of the journey, reaching for the hope to come. Megory Anderson wrote a fantastic book called Sacred Dying, in which she guides you through how to create some personal rituals for those leaving this world. In one story, she's working with a young woman who had a lot of pain and issues that she was carrying right to the last of her breaths. So Megory had her sit, and as she was telling her story, Megory took a sheet, a bed sheet, and the young woman tied a knot in the sheet for every painful event of her life, until in the end she was left with this big knot clump of the bed sheet. And then, this is the genius, they invited her parents to come in, and together Megory would, or the young patient would tell the story of the pain, and together with the parents they would undo the knot representing each event. It was a way to embody the act of reconciliation and forgiveness, and it helped her leave this world heart whole and her soul light, not carrying the baggage of pain. Again, because relationships are the clothing we wear to heaven. That story points to how the four most important things that we need to say as we're dying is, thank you, I love you, I forgive you, and goodbye. Rituals help us do this on the level of mind, body, and spirit. The most difficult part of our spiritual journey when death is approaching can also be the most transcendent part. I'm referring here to the phenomenon of nearing death awareness. Now, this is where a dying person undergoes a shift in consciousness and they are able to perceive the spiritual realm. And it's very common, it's universal, and has been going on throughout all history, all generations, all cultures, all peoples, age groups. It is the ultimate indication that we are transformed through death into a wonder beyond words. Nearing-death awareness can begin months or weeks before death, but really increase in the days and hours before a person dies. Dr. Christopher Kerr, a palliative doctor at Buffalo Hospice in New York, he found that amongst over 1,000 patients in his study, about 80% of them exhibited nearing-death awareness, and all of them described it as feeling so incredibly real and comforting. So what does it look like? For most, it's the deceased begins to perceive the spirits of loved ones who have passed on. Now, this may appear in a dream, but it feels unlike any other dream they've ever had. So vivid, so real, and it remains with a clarity of emotional and comprehended information that is far beyond any other dream state or natural memory. And it is an amazing thing when the family members are present to witness this. That changes their grief after their loved one has died. It helps facilitate healthy grief and a deeper sense of connection, ongoing connection to their loved one after they've left this world. Unlike delirium, which is marked by agitation and withdrawal, confusion, and fidgeting, nearing-death awareness is marked by peace, clarity, physical rest, calm, and heightened engagement, gentle awareness, reduction in pain, a shift and a sense of connection to everything. It's quite beautiful. So here's some tips on supporting the spiritual dimensions of consciousness at the end of life, especially when we're referring to nearing-death awareness. Give permission for them to talk about it by asking an open-ended question. Have you been having any dreams? Have you experienced anything unusual? Many are waiting for a safe moment to share this, but they worry others will think they're crazy or dismiss it as delirium. It's really a profound moment for them. So create a safe space with open-ended questions for them to express it. Second, validate and normalize their vision. The amazing thing is that this is more common than they may realize. Remember, Christopher Kerr found in over 1,000 patients, about 80% had these nearing-death visions. That's also been the case in my own work, and I trust if you're in hospice and end-of-life care, you've been there for some of these really amazing stories. Third point, listen with curiosity and empathy. Talk as little as possible. Lean in. Let your expression and your voice demonstrate your curiosity and your shared wonder at this moment. Use active listening, so that may be through repeating the few final words of a sentence. If a person says, "I felt so peaceful," then just lean in and say, "peaceful," right? That way in which you're repeating the word asks for more information and helps them articulate something that is really beyond words. The final spiritual stage of dying is what can best be described as a transformation. From our side of the bed, the breath is pausing and then fading and then stops. There may be a last deep breath, or it may simply cease. The pulse fades, the skin changes, and the eyes, if open, they become vacant. All movement ceases. There is a striking sense that this person is no longer there, that the life force is gone, and that the body is a shell. For the one who has died, the final moment, their spiritual transformation, is quite amazing. Now, we get this information from people who've had a near-death experience, which again, like nearing-death awareness, is incredibly common. For them, they say, there is a deep sense of peace, and then there is a release, sometimes accompanied by, some describe a buzzing sound, but it's not too unpleasant. There's just this release. Some find themselves then over the body looking down. They may be surprised, They recognize who that body is or was. They can perceive the thoughts and the feelings of those gathered around. Some report that they're able to travel at the speed of thought to be present with those who could not come to the hospital or be in the room. So they may be at home, could be hundreds of miles away, and they report what those people have been doing. Again, this is from near-death experiences where a person is temporarily transformed into that other dimension, have experiences, then they come back. Near-death experiences, again, have been reported throughout history and are independent of belief system and age and education or any descriptor. It's universal. And they all come back reporting that the foundational homework of life is about love, not as an emotion, but as a sense of connection and integration as the highest state of consciousness. So, the spiritual journey at the end of life is something we will all experience. It is the universal, foundational, and final dimension of being. It's best engaged with compassion, curiosity, with love, with storytelling, through rituals, through compassionate presence, through forgiveness and integration of the subconscious and the broken bits of our stories, through opening up, surrendering, giving ourselves to the final stages of consciousness and transformation, and through gratitude, focusing on our relationships as beautiful, though possibly broken bits of our brief journey on earth. How wondrous to contemplate, to consider that we do not stop when the body does. The spiritual journey at the end of life and all of the phenomenon which accompany it indicate that that indeed may be the case. Finally, with all of this, the spiritual journey is marked by a blessing, a prayer. Now, you can draw from your religious tradition the beautiful prayers and rituals for blessing of the body and release of the soul that are printed upon those pages. I usually pray from my heart in a way that I've now become comfortable with. I will stand over the body with the family there and ask them to come in close and hold hands. And I will instruct them, let's breathe deep. Breathe deep into this moment. Feel your feet planted on the floor. Feel the ache and sorrow within your heart. Feel the hand that is holding yours. Breathe. You're helping them be fully present in the moment. Then after about 30 seconds, right, which will feel uncomfortable, but it's critical that it be not just a few seconds. Let it go deep. And then I will say a prayer. Gracious God, we are so thankful for the gift of Michelle. Thank you for giving her to this family to know and love. Thank you for all that she is and has been in this world. And then I'll name what I understand of Michelle. A loving mother, a beautiful friend, a compassionate daughter, a person who has contributed to this community through, refer to her career. We pray that Michelle has released her body with gratitude and her life without regret. We pray that she is transported on the wings of angels to the wonder that awaits, and that she now shines in the company of saints and all the loved ones who have gone on before her. May she be free. May she dance. May she be one with the music of life. And may that love also enfold us who remain here in the long journey before us. And then this is important. Name the grief. Gracious God, there is now a hole left in the world, a hole that cannot be filled. Help us move into that hole with compassion and grace, discovering the gifts of Michelle that are yet to be opened, And when our day of transformation comes, may we see her on the other side. And then I'll give the what's called the ironic blessing from a figure named Aaron in the Hebrew Scriptures, right? May God now bless you and keep you. May God's face shine on you and be gracious to you. May God look upon you with favor and give you peace, right? In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Then hold the space. Don't let go of the hands next to you. Hold it, breathe into it. And notice the energy in the room. Notice how the family is grieving or weeping. And then when you release your hand, it will be the signal for others to release their hands. Then step back. Give them space. This is a sacred moment. After a while, ask a simple question such as, do you know what happens now? You're referring to what happens to the body. You can affirm that you can, as family, stay as long as you need to. Contemplate, be at her side. When you're ready, you can gather her things and we'll help you with that. And then we will care for her body while you go home and you take care of yourselves. I like to check if anyone is driving home alone. It's good if they have someone driving with them. And also instruct them, do you have a funeral home who will be picking up the body, and then to orientate them to the next few days. I often recommend, don't go to the funeral home right away. Go the next day. And when you arrive, you will have to identify the body, and it'll be laid out in a simple casket. So once you do that, it's another final moment to say goodbye and thank you. Then you can discuss the arrangements for the celebration of life. In the end, know that you are always connected to your loved one because God is love. So that bond is not broken by death. And I trust we will see them on the other side, which is my final word. As I look down upon the body of the one who used to dwell there, I will make the sign of the cross or touch them on the forehead, and I'll simply say, thank you. Thank you for the privilege of caring for you and your family. And we'll see you on the other side. I hope this brings you comfort and guidance, inspires your imagination and your wonder, not only as to how to be present with the dying, but in the nature of what you are and helping prepare you for your day of transformation. Until then, live well, love deep, and shine, because the world needs your light. Take care.